Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The prospect of having to deal with fire and floods at the same time is very real.
Be prepared for wildfires. The message from BC officials, even with a cooler start to the season. Also,
2.5 is ridiculous. I think it's setting people up for failure. I need more than that to wake up in the morning.
some BC drug users argue the amount of drugs Ottawa is set to decriminalize here is simply not enough. And ditching the diesel on the high creek. We're going to take you on board an electric aquabus.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Anita is away tonight. We begin with a break in the murder investigation of Trina Hunt. Our Isabel Regem joins us now with more on this developing story. Isabel.
Dan, an arrest has been made in connection to the killing of the Port Moody woman. Investigators are sharing very few details tonight. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team does say officers arrested one man outside a home in Port Moody. He has not been charged yet with a crime, so they are not releasing his name. IHIT took over the case after Hunt's remains were found last year. 48-year-old Trina Hunt was reported missing from her Port Moody home by her husband in January 2021. Her disappearance triggered months of searches involving hundreds of people. In March of last year, her remains were found in an area south of Silver Creek in the Hope area. I reached a family member a short time ago who tells me they have not been given any more information than what the public knows at this time. Understandably, they are asking for privacy tonight, adding that the family may talk when they are able to. Dan?
Isabel Regem reporting for us tonight. Thank you, Isabel.
Thanks.
Well, we may be in for a cooler, damper spring this year, and in fact living in it now, but experts are in full planning mode for wildfire season in BC. The rain has helped lower the fire risk, but officials say we are not in the clear yet. And as Yasmin Gandam reports, that's especially true for areas that are drier than usual.
The wildfire season may be off to a slow start, but that doesn't mean people shouldn't be prepared. After last year's devastating wildfires saw hundreds displaced from their homes and communities torn apart. This year, areas with drier weather like the Thompson Okanagan may have an increased wildfire risk, especially coupled with the possibility of flooding.
Fire season definitely around the corner. And, I emphasized with our staff yesterday, flooding is definitely what we're concerned about right now, but the prospect of having to deal with fire and floods at the same time is very real given this pattern that we're heading into.
A quick turn of the weather and BC Wildfire says conditions can change very quickly.
We walk through the summer, some of the patterns to watch out for are obviously these prolonged periods of dry spells, which are typically followed by lightning outbreaks, and we have these ridge breakdowns. So yeah, maintaining that awareness, particularly in those areas of the province, and just staying tuned to conditions as they change, because it doesn't take very long. It takes a matter of, sometimes a week for conditions to change quite drastically.
Even though some areas are at greater risk than others, Forestry Minister Katrine Conroy says when it comes to preparedness, everyone needs to have a hand in it.
Because we've had some of the worst fires in the history of the province in the last 5 years, people recognize that everybody is responsible. Everybody has to take a proactive attitude towards it, and so that we can stop it.
In the long term, late July and August may see above seasonal temperatures, which may bring a higher wildfire hazard as well. In its budget this year, the province promised $145 million for the expansion of the BC Wildfire Service when it comes to preventing and responding to wildfires. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, as people prepare for wildfire season, British Columbians are facing another familiar threat. Warming temperatures right now have towns throughout the interior keeping a very close eye on rising levels of rivers and streams.
The weather leading up to this has been extremely cool. Then we got some warm weather. Yesterday we had a little tiny bit of a flash flood. So it's been a mixed bag of everything, and we're just hoping that Mother Nature treats us well over the next few weeks.
She says her town, Terrace, is under a high stream flow advisory right now, meaning levels are rising or expected to rise very quickly, but no major flooding is currently forecast. BC's River Forecast Centre has issued similar advisories for places that saw severe flooding in the fall, like the Nicola and Coldwater rivers that changed the landscape in and around Spence's Bridge and Merritt. There are also advisories in place for the Okanagan and Thompson region, as well as the Kootenays. For more detail on this ongoing flood watch, let's bring in meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. Joe, that rain today probably not doing much to help that flood risk.
No, you're right, Dan. And we're really starting to see the impacts of all of this rain, along with the high snow melt and the accumulative effect from last year's wildfire disasters. We are just hearing, and I've got this on my weather map to show you, Highway 1 between Lytton and Spence's Bridge now closed because of multiple landslides. And we're hearing that the south side of the Thompson River, the community there affected by the landslides. So far, no reports of injuries. But this area, the South Thompson River, seen devastating erosion after last November's flooding. So again, those compounding effects. Highway 1 closed between Lytton and Spence's Bridge. And this is all part of this big weather system that also brought the intense rain to Vancouver earlier today. Take a look at the downpours across Metro Vancouver. This is the kind of intensity that we're seeing with this system. I think we have some video to show you of the heavy rain that caused people to pull over on the roads earlier today. Low visibility, pooling on the roads. I think everyone was hit with it, and we're not quite done with it yet. Dan, this is the system that we're worried about across the interior, and that's going to add to the high stream advisories and flood watches in place. I'll have more on the full forecast coming up in a bit.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe.
You're welcome.
In other news, jurors in the trial of BC-born singer Jacob Hogarth say they have reached a decision on one of the charges. Hogarth, who hails from the Fraser Valley, has pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of sexual assault causing bodily harm and 1 of sexual interference in relation to allegations from 2 women. While jurors say they have reached a conclusion on 1 charge, they can't agree on the others. The judge has told them for the second time to keep deliberating. They will resume that tomorrow. North Vancouver RCMP are asking for your help after a man was slashed with a machete during a fight outside the C-Bus terminal. The attack happened early Wednesday around 9:15 p.m. Police say 4 or 5 people attacked a 26-year-old man. He suffered serious but non-life-threatening injuries. They're asking anyone with video evidence to contact them. 2 teenage boys were detained later that evening, each carrying a machete, according to police. Again, anyone with information, contact North Vancouver RCMP. It's not enough. That's what some drug users in BC are saying about the amount of drugs Ottawa is set to decriminalize here in the fight against toxic drug deaths. They argue the 2.5-gram threshold is far too low and wonder how officials came up with that number. As Michelle Gassoub reports, they say it doesn't reflect people's reality.
BC set to become the first province to decriminalize small amounts of drugs, but with a hard limit of 2.5 cumulative grams. Many longtime drug users say that threshold means they won't be decriminalized.
2.5 is ridiculous. I think it's setting people up for failure, and I think as well, I need more not to wake up in the morning.
Kevin Yake has been using drugs for 40 years. He says the threshold doesn't take into account the realities of drug use. Many users buy in bulk, and fentanyl is so fast-acting, it forces users to quickly increase the amount they use.
The tolerance goes up, so you have to use a little bit more. So it's just that. You have to use a little bit more, you have to get a little bit more, you have to carry a little bit more, and that threshold number stays the same.
2.5 grams represents just over half a teaspoon. Now, BC had originally asked for the threshold to be 4.5 grams, but after consulting with law enforcement agencies in BC, the federal government decided that would be too high. Law agencies said around 85% of drug confiscations are for amounts less than 2.5 grams. The data varies across agencies and is complicated by the fact that some numbers include packaging while others don't. Vancouver police said it's too early to say how they'll enforce the limit, which comes into effect in January. That has users and advocates concerned.
How are police necessarily going to be equipped to eyeball that in the field? Second, does that mean that this might become a mechanism by which Anything above that threshold gets understood to be potentially possession with the intent to sell.
I just see more money for the police and more headaches and more obstacles for the user.
The federal government says the threshold is just a starting point and can be adjusted. While it's welcomed by those who use and study drugs, it's seen as a half measure.
It's a step that falls far below what's needed and that isn't accompanied by the types of supports that people need to have to be safe.
Nearly 10,000 people in BC have died from toxic drugs since 2016. A tragedy the government hopes this new step, a first in Canada, can stop. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
A new law is on the books in BC aimed at giving Indigenous, Black, and people of color better access to services. The goal of the anti-racism data legislation is to make it easier for diverse groups to take part in government programs. The act passed unanimously, allowing the province to collect demographic information like age, gender, identity, and ethnic origin, all to examine services like healthcare and employment. The data will be released to the public every year in order to support racial equity in BC. First Nations and the government are grappling with the state of BC's wild Pacific salmon and what some call a crisis threatening those animals. The Union of BC Indian Chiefs hosted the discussion today. Advocates argue wild sockeye and Chinook face an urgent threat from fish farms located along migration routes, specifically near the Discovery Islands. Scientists point to evidence fish farms in this area may spread disease, threatening the survival of wild fish. In 2020, Ottawa announced it would phase out the Discovery Island fish farms by the end of this month. If you've ever borrowed a book from a Vancouver Public Library and held onto it longer than you should have, listen up. Starting this month, the library will no longer be charging late fees. And any outstanding late charges on accounts are going to be waived. The VPL says the move is in response to the city's affordability crisis. It's scrapping overdue fines on print books, e-books, musical instruments, and interlibrary loans. So taking out materials will be barrier-free. Still, if you have something outstanding for 23 days or more, you will see a lost item charge in your account, and that will be cleared once you return it. Keep in mind, the library says it could take several weeks for accounts to be cleared of existing charges. Now, as Canadians get ready to dive into summer fun, a nationwide shortage of lifeguards is raising concerns about safety around beaches and pools. As the CBC's Kayla Hounsell tells us, cities and towns like West Vancouver are getting creative to try to fill the gaps.
Many Canadians have an expectation. When they show up at the beach, there will be someone sitting on a tower keeping an eye on the water. This summer, that may not always be the case.
You always feel kind of safer knowing that there's someone there, so I feel like it can make you feel a little uneasy if there's not.
There will be some beaches, I suspect, that will not have supervision that normally have. We're trying to avoid that.
Paul Dion runs the Nova Scotia Lifeguard Service. He's actively recruiting from swim teams.
The cohort that would have been trained the last 2 years, those 15, 16-year-olds have not been trained. We're trying to play catch up now.
It's a rush, it's urgent.
The National Society says there's a shortage of lifeguards across the country. It's also because pools shut down due to the pandemic and staff were let go.
They're in other sectors and they're settled there, and they're not coming back.
In Quebec, they're asking retired lifeguards to return.
If we want kids to enjoy swimming and to learn how to swim, it's up to us to get involved and to make sure that they get trained and properly supervised.
In West Vancouver, they're waiving the $1,000 training fee.
We are desperate to hire more lifeguards.
Everyone agrees closing pools would be unfortunate, but it's difficult to stop people from going to the beach. And that's a real safety issue.
And those 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds that go wandering into the water and they're playing there quietly while mom and dad are watching them, and mom looks down for 30 seconds to check her phone, and all of a sudden that wave has come, and where did that 3-year-old go?
As they scramble to fill the gaps for this summer, lifeguard services are also warning they've lost 2 years of training new recruits, which could mean a shortage for the next couple of years. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Queensland, Nova Scotia.
If you've never heard of Kabaddi, you're missing out. The frenetic game made a return to Surrey schools after a COVID timeout. We'll bring you more of the action after this. Thank you for joining us on our commercial-free live stream tonight. An animal lover in Newfoundland recently found something in the woods she could not leave behind. A baby squirrel, seemingly abandoned by its mother. Now it's in her living room with even more animal company. Troy Turner has the story.
But I guess I'm Mom. I don't know. Where he opened his eyes and he saw me, it's either me or Berlin. One of us is Mom.
A squirrel named Alvin. Yes, after the famous chipmunk. Alicia Rideout and her border collie Berlin were hiking a trail in Green Bay when the dog found an ailing infant. They left him in the woods, expecting his mother to care for him.
And I knew you're not supposed to just take a random wild animal home, so I did leave him the first night alone. But when I came back with a bucket and a blanket to put him in, I was like, you're coming home with me. So he did.
That's when the bond with Berlin really shone.
When I first brought Alvin home and I wanted to show everybody, like, oh, I have this squirrel here. When anyone would get close to Alvin, Berlin would just get right on top of him, like, no, you're not getting any closer. He's very protective of Alvin.
The two cuddle all the time, but Alvin also likes to run around. When it's bedtime, he settles down with Rideout.
We'll go to bed around 12 and he'll wake me up around 7. And he usually wakes me up by chewing on my eyelashes.
Alvin feeds on kitten formula and small nutrient capsules.
But once he gets out of that cage, he's go, go, go.
He's been to the vet and is scheduled for deworming. However, Rideout and the Provincial Wildlife Department don't recommend people take wild animals home.
A lot of people say, you know, the squirrel sleeps in bed on your pillow. You can't release him in the wild. And then some people say he's so used to your dog, he's not going to be afraid of predators, so he might get eaten in the wild. And those things do worry me about releasing him back, because I am supposed to release him back after 12 weeks old. But the thought is in my mind, maybe he'll want to stay. Maybe he won't want to leave. So I'll leave the door open. If he wants to go, you know, I'll leave and he can go. But if he wants to stay, he can stay.
Troy Turner, CBC News, Corner Brook.
It was a sloppy game day for high school kabaddi players in Surrey. The Surrey High School Kabaddi Championships were held today with Panorama Ridge Secondary pitted against Queen Elizabeth. Kabaddi has been described as a cross between rugby and wrestling. The centuries-old Indian sport is also one of the fastest growing in that school district. Before the pandemic, the Surrey High School Kabaddi League's matches drew upwards of 300 people.
Well, Kabaddi's been around for about 400 years, and we've introduced this sport in the Surrey School District about 6 years back.
After a grueling contest, Panorama Ridge emerged victorious as this year's league champions. Planning for next year is already underway, with organizers hoping to start a women's league for Surrey students. Might not have been the best morning for it, but perhaps you hopped on a two-wheeler this morning. It is Go By Bike Week here in BC, and there have been plenty of festivities to honor the noble bicycle. Margaret Gallagher went to one very unique celebration.
Hello, Margaret Gallagher here from CBC. It is Go By Bike Week, so I am going to take my bike right here into Christchurch Cathedral, where they are having an annual ecumenical blessing of the bike. So come on and join me.
Why is
the Anglican Church blessing bicycles.
A number of years ago now, we recognized at our synod that we are in a state of climate emergency. And the role of Salal and Cedar, my church, is to bring people to whatever their next brave step for climate justice is.
May God be with you.
Well, I'm not a member of this congregation, but I think I will get my bike blessed. I also had a pretty bad accident last year, so it seems like a good idea.
God of wheels and cycles, bless Margaret's bike, bless Margaret's travel and commuting and getting around. Ask for safety. We ask for good working parts in this bike. We pray that you would bless all of her efforts to tell good stories and the way that this bike allows her to do that. Amen. Beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, my bike has been blessed, and I'm thinking about biking in a whole new way on World Bike Day. For CBC Vancouver, I'm Margaret Gallagher at Christchurch Cathedral.
Go in peace, Margaret. Now, if you're thinking of going electric, get in line. Our ride in False Creek has ditched the diesel and gone green. We'll hop aboard after this.
It was both a typical and a non-typical Vancouver welcome. Typical in the hundreds of small boats that escorted the Britannia under the Lions Gate Bridge. Untypical because in rainy Vancouver, the sun came out. In 3 years, Vancouver will host a World's Fair, Expo 86. So today, the Queen pushed the button that started the cement mixer that symbolizes construction of the Canadian Pavilion for the fair. In fact, there is always something to see. A building to open. A hospital to visit when you're a queen. But the crowds don't really care what she's doing as long as they get to see her.
Yeah, but I sort of got some shots of the back of her head.
Then this afternoon, British Columbia decided to throw a party for 38,000 people and the Queen.
Over 150 countries will come here for Expo 86, invited today by the Queen.
I would now like to extend to all the peoples of the world an invitation from the people of Canada to visit the World Exposition, which will take place in Vancouver in 1986.
That's the sound of 7,000 voices, children's voices, singing the theme song for Expo 86. The stadium is huge, the Queen a tiny figure, but it was enough. They saw her.
It took our heart. It's so spontaneous, you know, and so beautiful.
There's something thrilling about her. She just sends shivers up my spine.
She's pretty.
Vancouver is usually a restrained city, but today, for the Queen, 38,000 people let go. Eve Savory, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Queen and Prince Philip covered 1,100 miles yesterday, mostly through the spectacular northern area of British Columbia. Many of the stops were brief, 20 minutes or so, but at Williams Lake in the Caribou Country, something different. The royal couple took in a junior rodeo featuring the best of high school cowpokes in British Columbia.
Well, actually, I think it's a heifer, but that's all right. Here she goes! These young ladies down there have lots of fun.
A little comedy relief is a common enough thing at rodeos, and yesterday it also took some of the pressure off the cameramen who'd been facing those Brahma bulls. After the show, a quick visit to a giant barbecue pit, and then more of the patient mingling and chatting with hordes of spectators. At one point, the royal couple was introduced to the youngsters who moments before had been flat on their bottoms out in the rodeo area. And finally, as the old saying goes, off again, gone again, Flanagan to yet another stop on the BC Centennial Tour. Mike McCourt, CBC News, Williams Lake, British Columbia.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On June 15th, support immigrant entrepreneurs with CBC Vancouver's Anita Bath at the Surrey Board of Trade's online entrepreneur showcase. Register today at businessinsurrey.com. And CBC Vancouver is a proud returning media partner of the Talking Stick Festival, June 12th to July 3rd. Enjoy and celebrate Indigenous art, dance, theatre, film, and more. Get tickets and learn more at fullcircle.ca.
They are floating icons of tourist hotspots like False Creek and Victoria's Inner Harbour. Small, rotund, and quite distinctive. The ferries that shuttle pedestrians from one shore to another are also known for their distinct putt-putting sound. But one aquabus here in Vancouver is noticeably quieter these days. That's because it's gone electric. We hit the water last week to find out why and how the company made the green switch.
One of the reasons we got into the business because we just love that idea of a little electric boat. I'm Jeff Pratt. More of a dreamer. That's what you have to be when you own a boat. Well, I've been on the water myself for, I hate to say it, 40 years. It was a real working environment that we came into. Kind of one thing that we really like about False Creek, it's for everybody. It's just a great place in the middle of the city. The technology is changing rapidly. We just decided let's just give it a shot again. So we got a new system and it's just worked out fantastic so far. This particular boat is our bus number 2, and it's a wooden boat that was built on Vancouver Island. But we just thought that this one has done such a great service to us, and we just felt that we needed to take the old diesel out of it and put in something nice and quiet so it can probably finish out its years peacefully. There's a lot of things you don't have to do with electric power that you start realizing as you're installing it. So there's a ton of stuff that you're not going to have to maintain all the time and replace. So the numbers, once you start figuring all that number will become much more clear. And of course the fuel savings, it's a big deal there. So I don't have the number offhand, but I would have to say it's a little while before the payback, more than most people would feel comfortable about. I can't get over how quiet it is because we're just so used to diesel engine, and even if it's at idle, it's clanging away and banging. And it's just like we're talking at a nice lower pitch. We don't have to yell holler anymore, so it's fantastic. The waves hitting the boat, which is something that you didn't hear before. It was a big process doing it and a lot of work. I feel like doing another one right away. So I feel great.
Quieter aquabus. All I could think and all I could listen to today, Joe, was aqua lung, just because it was a little closer to that.
Yeah.
Not bad.
I think that's the theme song. But,
you heard it here. Some artist is going to do it. Not a
that's
bad.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. A bit of a change today,
it's a
eh?
great local story. Yes, and Dan, I know you were really excited to use a certain word today.
Mm-hmm.
That word is
petrichor. I had to look it up, but it's true.
Petrichor is the smell after it rains, and that's certainly what we had today after a couple of dry days. Take a look at the radar right now. I did look it up as well, and petra is Greek for the smell of stone, and ichor is the golden blood of the immortals. I mean, that sums it up, basically. That totally sums it up. Yeah. So still seeing that steady rain east of Abbotsford. This is what we're watching to impact, of course, the high streams across the province. I'll show you that in a quick moment, but definitely watching for steady rain along Vancouver Island. We're going to see that ease for us, but watching those spots where we do have the flood watches, Bulkley River, and then down across parts of the interior. Check out the forecast, though, for Metro Vancouver. Rain tomorrow. But sunshine in the afternoon, and we'll see some of that mugginess back. We'll get the sunshine out. Sunday is a bit of a washout. I think the rain will end before the end of the day. And then, Dan, we've got some 20s in the forecast for next week. We'll be watching that melt closely.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, Joe. Have a good weekend.
You too, Dan.
Thanks. You can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news is right here at 11 o'clock after hockey and the National tonight with Isabel Regam. I'll be away next week, so we'll see you later in June. We're going to leave you with some rainy Vancouver pictures. Bit of a change from now. Enjoy the weekend. Be safe.